I'm Dr. John Gartner.
And I'm Dr. Harry Segal.
And welcome to another session of Shrinking Trump.
Well, this is our 43rd episode, John, and I am so tired. But I'm not tired from doing 43 episodes. I'm tired from. Well, I don't know. I thought it was easy.
More tired. You're more tired for what the episodes are about.
Well, yeah, that's what I'm trying to say, which is that this has just been the 6th week of Trump's second term. And his capacity for destruction, impulsive behavior, criminal behavior, compulsive lying. I couldn't watch, for example, his address to Congress, but I read it. It's just, there's not even an attempt to tell the truth almost all the time. And John and I began the show because we were worried about his decline in cognitive functioning, but also his severe personality disorder. And John was predicting that we would see a destruction of our democratic norms, a destruction of the balance of power our balance of power of the different parts of our government. Why am I not talking very well today?
Separation of powers, I think, is what you're
trying to. Thank you. The separation of powers. I'm not suffering.
That was so 6 months ago, Harry.
So anyway, just to
6
end
weeks
this long,
ago. It's easy to forget.
To end this long lead-in, what I was trying to say was, it's exhausting following the events in Washington and in the world. Yeah. And even though I'm broadcasting here from Paris, where I've been for 6 weeks, I'm not immune from the anxiety, from the rage that I'm feeling, the worry that I'm feeling, and the helplessness, which is part of it. But John and I are here to try to make sense of what's happened in the course of the week, and not simply as another set of pundits, although we do have political views and observations, but as clinical psychologists. We are trained to think about how people function, how personalities are structured. And they're structured, by the way, in extremely complicated ways. And so we're here to help you think about what's been going on. John?
You know, I know it gets a little depressing and repetitive for me to say each week, well, things have gotten worse and worse, and they keep getting worse, and they've even gotten worse this week. But this week really was a special inflection point. With this horrible meeting with Zelensky in the White House, to me, this is really a day that will live in infamy. It really is America breaking bad. It really is as if we abandoned, and reamed out Winston Churchill, in the Oval Office, and joined Hitler in the middle of World War II. This is really a Rubicon of sorts. We have broken bad. We have abandoned our allies, and we have joined the axis of evil.
This is the week, and I have a small private practice, and I've been working with people over online, over Zoom. And this is the first week where intelligent, educated, thoughtful people are starting to think about how long can they live here in the United States under this administration. And while they're not ready to jump yet, and I don't think they should yet, the fact that they're thinking about it after what happened in Washington is no surprise to me.
But just so people know, we are forming a small Shrinking Trump travel agency, and for a small fee, we will help relocate you. Like in Breaking Bad, where Saul Goodman, ends up as working in a chicken store, a convenience store, when he's in the witness protection program or whatever, or he's on the lam.
Well, but the real point of our travel agency is so that you can hide us when we come looking for help. Anyway, John. Should we
Well,
talk about
yeah. Well,
the
speaking of that day
overall-
that will live in infamy, I know you took you have a bunch of clips that you wanted to show, and you've got a particular theory of the case as to what happened that day. And we're also going to look at it from a bunch of different angles. There's a lot of different. As psychologists, we know that behavior is, the word we tend to use is overdetermined, meaning
Right.
there can be more than one source or cause of a given behavior. What happened in the Oval Office was actually quite complex, as well as devastating and evil. And so it's actually interesting to follow the timing. And this is something psychologists do. We follow the timing very precisely of a conversation and see what is a reaction to what. So it's actually very interesting to follow this whole sequence in a very sort of microscopic way. And I think that's what you've prepared for us today.
When I first told John my conclusions, we had a spirited debate about it because he felt that somehow I was claiming that, Trump had good intentions and it was all sabotaged by J.D. Vance. But that wasn't my point at all. My point was,
I never thought he had good intentions. I just don't want you to think that I ever thought that he had good intentions.
No. I said just the opposite. I said
I never thought you thought that either. I just want you to.
Oh, good. Oh, okay, good. Because I didn't. But I do think we get to watch Trump's what some of us in our field call self states. You get to watch Trump shift over the course of it. So I sat down and I watched the whole 49 minutes twice, taking notes. And I just want to show you how strange this is. Now, I want to begin, by the way, with giving you the background from last week. Now, last week, Macron came from France, and he masterfully, but not permanently or effectively, but for the moment, praised Donald Trump and said they were close friends and admired him. And when Macron arrived, what he did was, in the morning, he set up a G7 summit. Those are the 7 world economies, right? To meet with Trump, and they're primarily European. And what they did in that call was to say to Trump, we're going to provide security if there's a ceasefire so that Ukraine is protected. We're going to pay for most of it so you don't have to. And we'll make sure that Zelensky works out a rare earth metals deal with you so you can say you got that. And we love you, Donald. We believe in you and we appreciate you. And this is what we want. That's what happened before Macron and Trump were in the Oval Office. And I believe that place they put Trump in, that he began to have these thoughts. What if I can stop this war and beat Biden, who should never have let it happen? It wouldn't happen under my watch. And what if I can just get Vlad somehow to go along with it, because I can make a deal and I'm a genius and I'm the best, etc. So you saw Trump in his most grandiose, in his fantasy of being great. And remember, the thing about narcissistic personality disorders, as severe as Trump, is that it's a moment by moment thing. You feel great about yourself, and if someone looks cross-eyed at you or says you're stupid, you feel deflated, and then you attack. And then you reassure yourself. So when Trump lost the election, he was deflated. Then he began saying that he had actually won it, right? This is in 2020, right? And then he started operating to destroy things because he was building himself back up. Trump can change moment to moment. But when you see the beginning of this meeting with Zelensky, it goes on for a long time. And the liberal media only showed the explosion. They didn't show how it happened. So I want to show you, and I have a lot of little clips, but they're pretty short. So let's start with how Trump begins.
Well, thank you very much. It's an honor to have President Zelensky of Ukraine. And we've been working very hard, very close. So we've actually known each other for a long time. We've been dealing with each other for a long time and very well. We had a little negotiation spat, but that worked out great. I think for both countries, I think for the world, actually, beyond both countries. and we have something that is a very fair deal. And we look forward to getting in and digging and working and getting some of the rare earth. But it means we're going to be inside, and it's a big commitment from the United States, and we appreciate working with you very much.
Now notice, the United States is going to be in there digging and getting the metals. That makes Trump feel powerful. And it also makes him feel like he's getting something. And remember, Europe is saying to him, you don't have to worry about security, we'll pay for it. So this is a very fragile moment where Trump is feeling like, he's very powerful. Now, here's Zelensky 11 minutes later, where he hasn't threatened Trump yet, and they're still having kind of a good time.
We can help Europe because Europe really helped. President Trump said that they made less support, but they are our friends and they are our very supportive partners. They really gave a lot, Mr. President. They did.
They gave a lot, but they gave much less.
No.
Much less.
No. No.
Don't argue with me.
No.
Okay.
Okay.
They're kind of doing a bit there. Remember, Zelensky was an actor and comedian, and
both of them were former television personalities,
right? And he did just what Macron did, because Macron corrected Trump when Trump said that we had paid more than Europe, and Macron, it's the exact same thing. But you know what? It's going to start wearing down Trump's sense of being great and being powerful, and it's going to set up what happened later. So I'm going to go on next to Zelensky trying to appease Trump by saying that if he pulls this off, he'll be a great president, which is not the thing to say to someone who already believes he's the greatest president in history.
I'm sure that the United States president will not stop support. This is crucial for us. It's important for us. Yes. And Putin, the president, speaks about the people and the soldiers which are dying, but they came to our territory, they came to our land. They began this war, and they have to stop. And I think this is the question, with really the most important question. Can President Trump, I hope yes, with some other allies, to stop Putin, withdraw these enemies, our enemy, withdraw these troops from our land? And I think that you asked about the history, I think that if President, or when he will stop Putin, if President Trump will bring peace to our country, I think he will be on this wall.
Wrong. But Zelensky is still thinking he's speaking to someone who's rational and not narcissistically fragile. And you can see now, 2 minutes later, Trump starts to express those grandiose wishes, and it's quite striking.
But before you go to that tape, though, I just want to point out the body language. When he said, Putin invaded our country, suddenly Trump's face went very dark, and he started scowling. Okay, anytime Zelensky says anything bad about Putin, he immediately goes into a scowl.
He does, and because he's very allied with Putin, and he's very identified with him, and John thinks he's an active.
Don't talk about Tony Soprano. Don't talk about Tony Soprano. We'll have you whacked.
Okay, listen, agreed. But Trump also explains that he's trying to make nice. Look, please, I don't want to sound like I'm defending Trump, because I'm not. I am trying to explain him. So listen to what happened.
I think what you're trying to say, you're not defending Trump, what you're trying to say is that he's experiencing in a very transitory way a sense of narcissistic inflation, that he could be the peacemaker, that he could be the right. And so he's kind of reveling in this false sense of, look at me, this great peacemaker. But as you point out, these states are very transitory.
Oh boy. All right. So check out. So remember the you'll be on the wall. Well, here's what Trump says a few minutes later.
I hope I'll be known and recognized as a peacemaker. This would be a great thing to solve. This is a very dangerous situation. You know, this could lead to a third world war. This was headed in the wrong direction.
Okay, I'm going to be the great peacemaker. I'm going to save the world. And then a Polish reporter asked the question about why is Trump aligning himself so much with Putin, to get to John's point. And this is Trump's response.
Does that mean you'll provide security guarantees, Mr. President?
I don't want to talk about security yet because I want to get the deal done. You know, you fall into the same trap like everybody else. A million times you say it over and over. I want to get the deal done. Security is so easy. That's about 2% of the problem. I'm not worried about security. I'm worried about getting the deal done. The security is the easy part. Security is very nice. Everybody stops shooting. And now will Europe put people there? I know France is going to. I know the UK is going to. I know other countries are going to, and they happen to be right next door. We haven't committed, but we could conceivably. You know, we have security in a different form. We'll have workers there digging, taking the raw earth so that we can create a lot of great product in this country. So in that sense, you have something, but we haven't determined that yet. I will say, in speaking to France and in speaking to, and they were here, as you know, last week and just the other day, they have committed to a lot of security. I don't think you're going to need much security. I think once this deal gets done, it's over.
Sorry, I was just grabbing a later clip. It's very revealing here what he's saying. He's buying what the G7 pushed on him and Macron pushed on him 3 days earlier. And he's saying, and you can see him just making it seem okay to him, right? I can go along with this deal because I'll be the peacemaker and we'll be getting those raw metals. And he's right to say that if we're there digging raw earth, that might keep Putin from trying to attack the country. But who knows? I mean, I don't believe anything he's saying. But anyway,
it's rare earth metals, by the way, not raw earth. Just not to be so punctilious about it, but just he keeps saying it wrong.
Well,
he says it 3 different ways, and all of them are incorrect. Just saying.
Gee, John, you're just being so picky. I mean, it's just a phonemic paraphasia.
Well, technically, this would be more of a semantic paraphasia.
You're right.
Because
you're
raw
right.
is a word. It's just not the right word.
This is the same guy. All right. So actually, that was Caitlin Collins, who he then puts down and tells her that she's stupid and that CNN should be more careful about its ratings because, you know, he just likes to piss on people. All right. And now this is with the Polish reporter gets a question in.
I wanted to know if you want to position yourself in the middle between Russia and
Yes.
Ukraine or on the Ukraine side.
No, I'm in the middle. I want to solve this thing. I'm for both. I want to get it solved. And it's wonderful to speak badly about somebody else, but I want to get it solved. If we can solve it, great. If we can't solve it, they're going to have to fight it out, and who knows what's going to happen. But I want to see it get solved.
And this is the rationale for the moment. I don't want to say anything bad about Putin because that would screw up the deal, even though he called Zelensky a dictator only the week before. And then when asked about it, said he hadn't. Okay, you can't make
also it's a real shift. You know, it sounds plausible, right? Well, I want to be neutral, you know, I want to be whatever. I want to be Bill Clinton, you know, bringing the two sides together in Camp David, or Jimmy Carter bringing Yasser Arafat and Menachem Begin together. I have to seem, it's American policy to be against Russian military aggression. Okay, it's not something we're actually neutral about, just because, but again, that was so 6 weeks ago, you know.
Exactly. And also you brought up the Nobel Peace Prize. Other people are saying that that's what got this moment going briefly. He's imagining himself getting the Nobel Peace Prize
because Obama got the Peace Prize, you know. Exactly. Obama got the Peace Prize, and I hear he paid prostitutes to pee on it. That's just a rumor. I don't know if it's true.
I just knew you were going to bring that up. All right, if we could, let's keep going. All right, so there's one more clip before we get to the blow up.
Well, if I didn't align myself with both of them, you'd never have a deal. You want me to say really terrible things about Putin and then say, Hi, Vladimir, how are we doing on the deal? That doesn't work that way. I'm not aligned with Putin. I'm not aligned with anybody. I'm aligned with the United States of America and for the good of the world. I'm aligned with the world.
Boy, that would be great if that was actually what he did and how he
Sure.
thought all the time. Then it would really be a deal maker, but that's not. You talked about Jimmy Carter and the deal between Menachem Begin and Egypt. That took weeks and weeks and weeks. He brought them into Camp David and kept them in different rooms for weeks because Jimmy Carter didn't have a severe personality disorder. He had a goal, he had a diplomatic team, and he went to work. Whereas we're just watching Trump having a week where he thinks he might be able to pull this off.
Right. He's just playing peacemaker on TV, literally.
Yes. And hoping at that moment that it will happen. See, I think Trump believes everything he says. I really do. Anything that he thinks of, he means at that moment. It's much easier to understand him if you don't think of him as utterly manipulative, as if he's like a deep sociopath who plans and stuff. He doesn't. He just goes from mood state to mood state. Yeah. And it usually results in, identifying with vicious dictators and destroying things, which he likes to do.
Right. Well, you're going to show us the moment when everything goes to shit. So let's watch that. But I think that then we can talk about it. So why don't you go, you can set it up and then we'll
all right. So when I watched this, I realized at the end of this, it's Vance. Vance sees Trump's, pink balloon and he pokes it. He's the one who sabotages this moment. Watch.
What makes America a good country is America engaging in diplomacy. That's what President Trump is doing.
Can I ask you?
Sure.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Okay. So he occupied our parts, big parts of Ukraine, part of East and Crimea. So he occupied it on 2014. So during a lot of years, so I'm not speaking about just Biden, but those time was Obama, then President Obama, then President Trump, then President Biden, now President Trump, and God bless, now President Trump will stop him. But during 2014, nobody stopped him. He just occupied and took. He killed people. You know what the contact
2015.
2014.
2014 and 2015.
2014.
Yeah. So
I was not here.
Yeah, but
that's exactly right.
Yes, but during 2014 till 2022, the situation the same. The people have been dying on the contact line. Nobody stopped him. You know that we had conversations with him, a lot of conversation, my bilateral conversation, and we signed with him, me, like a new president. In 2019, I signed with him the deal. I signed with him, Macron and Merkel, we signed ceasefire. Ceasefire. All of them told me that he will never go. We signed him with gas contract. Gas contract. Yes, but after that, he broken this ceasefire. He killed our people and he didn't exchange prisoners. We signed the exchange of prisoners, but he didn't do it. What kind of diplomacy, JD, you are speaking about? What do you mean?
I'm talking about the kind of diplomacy that's going to end the destruction of your country.
Yes, but if you
Mr. President, with respect, I think it's disrespectful for you to come into the Oval Office and try to litigate this in front of the American media. Right now, you guys are going around and forcing conscripts to the front lines because you have manpower problems. You should be thanking the president for trying to bring an end to this conflict.
Have you ever been to Ukraine that you say what problems we have?
I have been to.
Count once.
I've actually watched and seen the stories, and I know what happens is you bring them on a propaganda tour, Mr. President. Do you disagree that you've had problems bringing people into your military? And do you think that it's respectful to come to the Oval Office of the United States of America and attack the administration that is trying to prevent the destruction of your country?
A lot of questions. Let's start from the beginning.
Sure.
First of all, during the war, everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless. God bless. You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel. We're trying to solve a problem. Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
Actually, he
just
goes
want
on
to-
from there and says,
John,
you,
Tom,
you have a
before you-
weak hand. Yeah.
Oh no, right. And I could have included it, but we've all seen it. But look, John has some good insights about this. But I just want to say, what Vance accuses Zelensky of doing, he didn't do.
Mhm,
He wasn't
mhm,
attacking the administration. He
mhm,
was
mhm.
praising the administration. He was saying that Trump would be a hero. He was saying that Trump, if God willing, can help us. Vance sabotaged it. Once Vance said, "How dare you come here and attack, litigate this in front of the media and disrespect the Oval Office," Trump had to attack him at that moment. He had to, because that made Trump look weak. And then when Zelensky says, you have an ocean, so you don't feel bad, but someday you'll feel bad. And what was he saying, John, to him?
Well, the thing is that it's very interesting that he erupted at that moment. So there's two things that were going on. One is that Vance, as you're saying, kind of ramped him up and said, he's disrespecting you. He's disrespecting you, of course, which then makes the malignant narcissist crime boss have to, lash out, right, to show that he's strong. But also, this reminds me of an old psychoanalytic theory of paranoia that I don't think I've frankly thought about or recruited in many, many years. But Freud had the idea that people who had paranoid delusions, that some of them had a conflict about homosexuality, that they had some desire to be penetrated, perhaps, but a fear of being penetrated as well. And that fear of penetration creates the paranoid reaction. What Zelensky said is, you have an ocean between you and Putin, but then Putin's going to come and he's going to penetrate your country, and you're going to feel what it feels like to be invaded. And that's when he goes nuts, basically. Says, don't tell me what to feel. I'm not going to feel anything. I'm not going to feel any penetration. Fuck you. And so I think that I do believe that Trump did ultimately have the intention of sabotaging this deal. But the fact that he did it in such an impulsive and discontrolled way, I think, is a result of his personality disorder and his dementia, so that essentially he kind of went nuts. He had no impulse control. He just had an outburst that wasn't planned.
Well, think about it, right? Because Zelensky is reminding Vance, and he really was fine with Vance, saying, look, it started in 2014. And then Trump says 2015. And Zelensky says, no, 2014. And Vance echoes it. 2014. And you know what Trump says? Remember?
Oh, I wasn't here. It's not my fault.
I wasn't here then. What the hell?
That's all he cares about. No one can blame me.
Such a strange comment, though. I mean, of course he wasn't there then. Someone else was president. Anyway, I think Vance wanted to sabotage this meeting at this moment. I don't think Trump was planning to sabotage this later. I just think he would have, because Vlad would have gotten him on the phone and said, cut it out. And he would have said, okay. But at the moment, I don't think he wanted to. But Vance saw it. And Vance, I believe, is so pro-Soviet. He's quoting him. He's pro-Russian. So Vance knew how to burst the bubble. He knew he did this. This was his doing. And I'd never realized before how dangerous Vance is.
Well,
Vance exceeds Trump. And listen, one last thing. I have someone I know who's very wise, astute about politics. He's predicting that Vance is going to remove Trump in a year and a half using the 25th Amendment in order to take power and then run for office. And then we'll see everything fall apart.
We'll see. Remember during the first Trump administration, we talked about the fact that there were still some guardrails. Even though, he appointed Rex Tillerson, who had won the Russian Medal of Freedom, right, and was recommended by Paul Manafort, right? So even then, he had sort of stacking the deck with a pro-Soviet, as you would put it, cabinet. He was still an American. who believed in the law and the Constitution. And so these characters restrained some of his most treasonous and crazy ideas. Now, not have guardrails. I think this is really an important point. We have Russian guardrails. We have Russian guardrails. So if by any chance Trump should wander off the reservation, in some grandiose way in his mind, fantasizing that he's some kind of Mandela, figure making peace around the world, we've got people to kind of keep him, look, remember the treason plan. Remember the treason plan. Don't go off script. Stay on course.
Absolutely. And so what I want you all to take away from this is the moment by moment way in which Trump can be inflated, can have an idea. And remember, Trump thinks anything he thinks is right. Anything he thinks he's certain is right. And you can watch him be deflated and manipulated by Vance. And you know what? That makes him even more dangerous, that Trump can be manipulated like that.
Yeah, I agree. I had a whole bunch of stuff about this meeting, but I decided just to end with one commentary by a commentator I know we both really know and love, David Brooks, his response to this Oval Office meeting.
I was nauseated. I just nauseated. All my life I've had a certain idea about America, that we're a flawed country, but we're fundamentally a force for good in the world. That we defeated Soviet Union, we defeated fascism, we did the Marshall Plan, we did PEPFAR to help people live in Africa. And we make mistakes, Iraq, Vietnam, but they're usually mistakes out of stupidity, naivete, and arrogance. They're not because we're ill-intentioned. What I've seen over the last 6 weeks is the United States behaving vilely to our friends in Canada and Mexico, vilely to our friends in Europe, and today was the bottom of the barrel. Vilely to a man who was defending Western values at great personal risk to him and his countrymen. Donald Trump believes in one thing. He believes that might makes right. And in that, he agrees with Vladimir Putin, that they are birds of a feather. And he and Vladimir Putin together are trying to create a world that's safe for gangsters, where ruthless people can thrive. And we saw the product of that effort today in the Oval Office. And at first I was thinking, am I feeling grief? Am I feeling shock, like I'm in a hallucination? But I just think shame, moral shame. It's a moral injury to see the country you love behaving this way.
It was very well put.
Yeah.
And sad.
Yes.
That's what you guys come here for folks, so we can make you even more depressed than you already are.
We have to do our part.
It's a rough job, but somebody's got to do it. So to continue onward with the bad news, one of the things that's really interesting, we have a great interview today with George Conway, and one of our great guests that we have recurrently, and he talks about Trump's psychology in gaining joy, sadistic pleasure from destroying things and from destroying the country. That really only by recruiting the idea that Trump gets some perverse pleasure out of destroying the country can you even make sense of a lot of the things that he's doing. For example, I believe that Trump is going to intentionally destroy the American economy. Not for him and the billionaires, we'll get to that later, but for everyone else, including the millionaires, okay, just the regular millionaires, okay, and upper middle class and middle class and lower, all the regular people, all the bottom 99%, okay, he is going to decimate them economically. So let's start with these tariffs going into effect. What effect is that going to have on the businesses on Main Street?
And remember, Trump has always believed in tariffs. It's one of the few actually consistent beliefs he has, because it makes him feel powerful. Right. And because he thinks they're good, then everything will be fine. And he'll destroy everything. But in his mind, he's just being great. All right.
So let's hear what the local car dealer has to say about the tariffs.
Chrysler, Jeep, Dodge, Ram.
Yeah.
Impact.
Dramatic. I sold order for a customer, $80,000 truck. It's $100,000 now. So he's not going to buy the truck. It's going to sit on my lot at the higher interest rates we're paying right now for floor plan, and nobody's going to buy the truck because it just had a $20,000 price increase.
Right. Kelley Blue Book will put the number up. They say the average vehicle will go up by about $3,000. Does it sound right to you?
No, it will not. We don't have the broad stroke. We don't have the linear, the tight strokes. But to me, it's a 25% tariff. So that affects our parts that come from over these countries, and a whole bunch of our cars.
Now, interestingly, he's not just today declared a 1-month pause on tariffs on cars, but that's only going to be a Band-Aid. This is going to be a huge weight on the retail economy, on the day-to-day economy, the real economy.
Well, Trump gets frightened when the stock market crashes. He does. I mean, he's always been terrified of that. So, because that's going to make him feel small.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. He is, of course, we know this week the stock market did crash. I don't think this is the end. We're going to talk about that in a minute. I do have to share one thing with you. So when Trump was first elected, I foresaw so much catastrophe that I took our family money out of the stock market. And as you know, during the Trump administration, the stock market went up a lot. And so in my family, I am still the GOAT because I made that what they feel was a boneheaded, move, right? I believe I saw the future. I just saw it too far down the road and thought it was closer, because now when he was elected this time, I was convinced this time he's definitely going to destroy the economy, but I didn't dare take our money out of the market. And of course, that's what's happening. That's at least that's what happened this week. And I do think it's going to get worse, but let's look at the stock market last week. And this is actually very funny. This is our friend David Pakman describing what happened with the stock market last week.
The stock market crashed as Donald Trump was speaking yesterday, talking about how powerful and strong and alpha his tariffs are. And you could see in the lower right of the screen as the Dow Jones was simply collapsing. Let's start with Donald Trump's big declaration, big dump of information here. Tomorrow, meaning today, 25% tariff on Canada, 25% tariff on Mexico, and he did it. Watch the stock ticker in the bottom right of the screen.
So we're going April 2nd, but...
And I'm sorry, my logo is covering that up. Let me see if I can actually uncover that. Here, let's just go with this for now.
Very importantly, tomorrow tariffs 25% on Canada and 25% on Mexico, and that'll start. So they're going to have a tariff. So what they have to do is build their car plants, frankly, and other things in the United States, in which case they have no tariffs.
There you go. So it's all starting, and the Dow at one point down more than 800, nearly 900 points. And Trump was asked, can Mexico and Canada do anything so that you would change your mind here? Is there any saving grace where you would say, well, let's hold off? And Trump says, no.
So I love the fact that he's announcing his tariffs with pride, as in the logo in this corner, they're showing the stock market crashing as he speaks, bragging about his alpha tariffs.
Incredible.
But what do we think is going to happen? To the extent that the stock market represents the actual performance of actual companies, right? If we're going to be putting a 25% tax on everything they import, and then other countries are going to retaliate and put a tariff on everything we export, right? It's going to hurt American business. But that's not all, okay? It's not just the inflationary price increases that's going to hurt business, and the fact that our prices on our goods overseas are going to go up, which means no one's going to want to buy them. At this point, we have made people hate us so much that they're almost organizing an informal set of sanctions against America, that
Right.
we're becoming a pariah state. Listen to what Doug Ford, who's the head of Ontario in Canada, I forget what his title is, but he's the head of Ontario, all the steps that he's planning to take to punish America economically.
And as the exclusive wholesaler, American brands will no longer be available in LCBO catalog, meaning other retailers, bars, and restaurants in the province will no longer be able to restock U.S. products. This is an enormous hit to the American producers. Every year, the LCBO sells nearly $1 billion worth of U.S. wine, beer, cider, seltzers, and spirits, including more than 3,600 products from 35 states. As of today, every single one of these products is off the shelves. Also, starting today, all U.S.-based companies will be banned from taking part in government procurement. Every year, the province and its agencies spend about $30 billion on procurement, alongside our more than $200 billion plan to build infrastructure. U.S.-based businesses will now lose out on tens of billions of dollars in revenues. They only have President Trump to blame. I'm also urging all 444 municipalities to do the same, and I'm thrilled to see some are already stepping up. For example, Mayor Patrick Brown in the city of Brampton and many other cities. As part of this government-wide procurement ban, we're going one step further. We're ripping up Ontario's contract with Starlink. It's done, it's gone. We won't award contracts to people who enable and encourage economic attacks on our province and our country. Alongside federal tariffs and the measures my fellow premiers are bringing forward, this Team Canada's opening response. We also need to be ready to dig in for a long fight. We need to be ready to escalate using every tool in our toolkit. That includes surcharges or even outright restrictions on the critical minerals and electricity we supply to the United States.
Actually, he goes a little further to say that they could actually cease sending electrical power to New York State. That they would literally turn off the electrical grid.
And listen, yesterday the Chinese said that they are ready for a trade war, or even a real war. And what I learned when I was in college is that trade wars lead to real wars. I mean, people fight over these things. There's a reason why. Look, there are a lot of problems with globalization. I'm not trying to say it's a panacea, but when you start restricting markets, everybody suffers.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's a lose-lose. And, Warren Buffett said that tariffs are a form of war.
They are.
Actually.
They are.
Look, but there's one place where I think the Canadians went a little too far. Okay, just a little too far. They're renaming American cheese Freedom Cheese. Remember Freedom Fries?
I remember the reference.
Okay. So we're going to decimate. We're going to decimate the economy. And I've had so many people say to me, well, all the rich people aren't going to put up with that. He's going to have to stop doing that, because after all, doesn't Trump work for the rich people? And you see, there's rich and there's rich, and the really, really rich are not like you and I, to paraphrase F. Scott Fitzgerald. Okay. And so actually the really, really rich could actually survive a recession or a stock market crash. Why? Because they're making so much money in crypto. Because the other thing that Trump is doing is opening a strategic crypto reserve. And you might ask yourself, what the hell is a strategic crypto reserve? Well, one of our friends from Crooks and Liars had the same question.
What the fuck is a strategic crypto reserve and why do we need one? You have a strategic reserve of things like oil and helium because if you run out of oil in an emergency, you're screwed. Nothing happens if we run out of crypto. We don't need crypto just in case. So how does this new strategic crypto reserve that the Trump administration announced actually work? Nobody knows. So then why did the Trump administration announce this? It's corruption, plain and simple, right in front of our fucking faces. It's a massive gift to his biggest tech bro VC allies who bet big on crypto. And it's a way for Trump to make millions himself while making sure nobody asks too many questions. Trump's SEC dropped an enforcement action against Coinbase. It's pausing a lawsuit against Binance. And they are putting a stop to regulations that would have made crypto more transparent. It used to be that corruption had a paper trail or like literal paper. This is an actual image of the cash found in Congressman William Jefferson's freezer. Now, any person, any corporation, any foreign government can basically just deposit money directly in the president's bank account with like no paper trail. If you need a favor, you're worried about a tariff, you want a sweet government contract, happiness is just a few clicks away. So why are they doing a strategic crypto reserve? Because Trump wants to make America the corruption capital of the world, and now he wants to use your tax dollars to help make it happen. It's fucking bullshit.
I think that's the best short explanation of what's going on with the crypto that I've heard.
Yeah, it's kind of great, isn't it?
Yeah.
He's terrific.
Yeah. So look, so when the country is on fire, Trump and his billionaire friends will be raking in trillions.
All right. Do you have one more depressing thing to show
I
us?
do have one more depressing thing. I would have more, but we're running out of time, obviously. I just want to, as Rachel Maddow says, watch this space. I'm just going to show you a headline. So let's just take a look at this. Trump bid to take over postal service could threaten mail voting. So in other words, Trump is, he in some ways he's sort of like Mussolini. Mussolini had 5 different jobs in his own cabinet. He would appoint himself like head of this and head of that. It's like Trump has appointed himself the head of the Kennedy Center. There's also now he's taking over the post office. But what would be the most valuable thing about taking over the post office? That he could manipulate the processing of mail-in ballots. We know that, what I have been predicting is not that 4 years from now they're going to cancel elections. What I'm fearful of is that we're going to have sham elections where they control the results, where they rig the results. Well, they're not afraid to get into the guts of the infrastructure, right? Mm-hmm. To manipulate things. And so if they have their little mitts, their little hands, right, on every little envelope, right, that's coming through the pike, I don't trust them to handle that mail responsibly. I was always worried about with Louis DeJoy. I never understood why the hell we never fired him. It's just another example of Biden's weakness and stupidity and basically cutting our throats with his naivete, because leaving all these patently corrupt people in positions of power. But now we really don't know what's going to happen to those mail-in votes.
Yeah. All right. Well, I feel terrible. How do you feel?
like after the show, we should get a drink.
I was taught by a supervisor of mine, a teacher of mine. I think it was my first patient, actually, who, after our session, I said, "How did it feel to you?" And he said, "I feel pretty good." He said, "My last therapist, I felt like it was open heart surgery without anesthesia." And I didn't know what to say. And I brought my notes into my supervisor. He said, "Next time a patient says that, tell them that sometimes they're going to leave feeling worse." Mm-hmm. Because that's part of facing reality about oneself and the world. And I still think, even if we're making everyone feel depressed tonight, that facing what's really happening is the best medicine. It just is.
Yeah.
Reality is.
I think I agree. And I'm glad today that we're going to be speaking with George Conway, who is a premier reality facer.
Yeah. Yeah, and he calls out you know, the evil things going on. He speaks truth to power, as they say.
Well, our next guest really needs no introduction. He's George Conway. If you own a television set and you ever watch the news, you've probably heard him speaking. He's been a strong part of the Never Trump movement, and most recently the head of the Anti-Psychopath Pack, where we were trying to alert the public to Trump's dangerous mental incompetence and psychopathology. We gave it our best shot. We made a lot of ads. George made a lot of ads. We were in some of those ads, and we beamed them to swing states, and we also beamed them to Mar-a-Lago. But I'll let George talk more about that. So with no further ado, here's George.
We did try to teach people what somebody with this kind of psychopathology could do with another term in office, and everyone decided they wanted to learn the hard way. And here we are.
Well, I had a couple. I just wanted to add to John's introduction. George has been on all the networks. He's been on most important shows, but I think most impressive was his appearance on "Have I Got News for You?" He was on the first episode when it came back in February, and I got to tell you, George got a laugh out of those all professional comedians except for George. I thought it was pretty great. But George, I would prefer if you would wear a suit when you come see it. I mean, what kind of respect is this?
I mean, you're right. I should have like a tech support T-shirt, right?
You're disrespecting the show, and you're disrespecting Harry, and I can't tolerate that.
Oh, here we are.
Here we are.
Here we are. Can't make this stuff up.
You can't make this up. Still, look, so the first piece of bad news is that all of the predictions we made about Trump being an authoritarian and an American Hitler are starting to come true at a very, very rapid rate. So now we're kind of shifting gears from diagnosing Trump to really wondering, can we survive Trump?
Yeah, and I mean, that's the whole thing. I think one thing got to go back to talk about this would be how much of a part of the malignant narcissistic personality that people like Eric Fromm described decades ago, how much of that is just sort of based upon, or how much of it results in this desire to destroy everything around them.
Yes.
And that, to me, that's the thing that I keep thinking about the most, is that people find it hard to believe all of the things he is doing, because the only way a lot of the things that he is doing makes any sense at all is if he were intentionally doing that to destroy the country.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is, if you are this personality type, you want to destroy everything around you, because that shows how powerful you are.
Right.
And it shows, it fits your psychopathology in another way. I mean, I'm telling the doctors this, but you can correct me.
No, but this is a very important
hopefully expand.
Yeah.
The desire to seek revenge on everybody for every slight that you have perceived has been inflicted upon you in your, I don't know how old he is now, pushing 80. That's what motivates him all. That's why he's perfectly happy to have Elon just randomly fire people and randomly destroy government offices, even the military, to attack the military. He didn't like the military because the military didn't do his bidding, or they thought he was stupid. He knew from his first term that a lot of people who worked in the government, including people he appointed, didn't think much of him. And now he's getting his revenge. The Kennedy Center. I mean, why would he concern himself about with the Kennedy Center, a place he didn't go to during his first term? Probably never been. I mean, who knows whether he had. Something he doesn't, he's not a promoter of the arts. He wants to destroy them. He wants to destroy the Kennedy Center because it is patronized by the people he wants to attack and who he believes look down, correctly actually, look down upon him. So everything is motivated by that. And he allies himself with people who share those ends for whatever reason, because either because they too seek the power, or they fit his pathology and he feels comfortable with them, like Putin. You know, it's just inherent destruction for destruction's sake.
I would just add one thing, George, to your good formulation, which is it gives him pleasure.
Yes, the sadism. That's one of the main
Exactly.
We talked about that. You've got the sociopathy, the narcissism, the pathological narcissism, and the Machiavellianism, and then the sadism. He wants to see people suffer. He wants to see them squeal, including the people who voted for him.
Yeah, it's a real Nero effect. It's really fiddling while Rome burns. And of course, Hitler's last decree was called the Nero decree, and his last decree was that everything in Germany should be destroyed right before he went to the bunker to kill himself. And what you're describing, Kernberg, who was the living expert on malignant narcissism, he coined the term omnipotent destructiveness. This feeling of power and pleasure, and this feeling that you are powerful and large because you are destroying.
Yes.
And I think your point is really well taken. There's no other way to explain all of his behavior, right? If you don't recruit this concept of sadism and omnipotent destructiveness, because otherwise half of it just wouldn't make sense, even if he wanted to be an authoritarian dictator.
Right. No, absolutely. And people around the world have caught on to this. I mean, today we saw video, I don't know if you saw it, but it was really going viral on social media, of a French senator in the National Assembly of France talking about where we are, where Trump has brought the United States and where Trump has brought the world. And he used the word Nero to describe Trump. Yeah. And that's exactly right. I mean, it's this incredible desire to destroy, to make things around them crumble. And it was, if he can't have people give him his affection and tell him how great he is, he'll show them by destroying everyone and everything. And there's this scene too. He tried to do it on the way out in January of 2021. Even Mitch McConnell, on February 13, 2021, in his speech where he explained why he voted against barring Trump from holding future office, yet nonetheless said that Trump was responsible for what happened on January 6th and that suggested that Trump should be prosecuted. He said that Trump wanted to basically destroy everything on the way out. Mm-hmm. And, that explains Trump. That explains where he is. I made this point. Maybe you recall, because I think I sent you the clip, John, 10 days after the election, when he had announced the appointment of Robert Kennedy Jr. and Matt Gaetz and Tulsi Gabbard, and also Pete Hegseth. And really, it was like I said, the only way you can make sense of these, I said this on Wolf Blitzer's show, and it may have been too much for television at that moment, but I said the only way you can understand these, I mean, these are actions that you would take if you were actively seeking to destroy the country and to damage it. And that makes perfect sense given it makes perfect sense given the man's psychopathology. And here we are. Do we need any more proof? I don't think so. But I think people really have difficulty getting their minds and arms around the concept of somebody who 49 point however many percent of the public voted for and is convinced and many people convinced that he is going to help them, is in fact someone who wants to harm the country and harm even the people who voted for him.
And one perfect example of that is the economy, right? Because the things he's doing to destroy the economy are going to lower all boats.
Correct.
So if with the tariffs, which is not only causing inflation, but then nobody can sell their cars. Although recently he tried to get a 1 month grace period for the car sellers. We showed a clip earlier on the show where this guy's a car salesman, and he says, "See this truck? Yesterday it was 80,000. Today it's 100,000. No one's going to buy this truck. It's going to sit here on my lot. I'm screwed." So it's affecting Main Street, and of course, then it's also affecting Wall Street. We've seen how the markets are tanking. So this, I think, is another illustration of your point, our point, George, which is that there's no advantage to an incumbent president to destroy his own economy,
right?
unless he enjoys destruction for destruction's sake, and actually even enjoys hurting the people who supported him, which he does.
But I'm going to ask you guys a question now, because you guys are the doctors. What do you make of his approach to the tariffs of saying, here are the tariffs, then stepping back, saying, here are the tariffs again, and then say, well, we're going to hold off on cars, and then we're going to hold off on Mexico? Why the back and forth, right? I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Why, if he's really seeking to destroy the country, why the kind of back and forth on this? Are people pushing back on him, or is he doesn't want to get his fingerprints on it, or is it like some kind of a torture where he
I was like a cat and a mouse.
Power. Yeah, John, do you want to take a shot?
I'm very interested in the answer.
We each have an answer. So I would say,
yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, so I would say he does get a sadistic pleasure, like a cat playing with a mouse, and he's always kind of going one way, going another way. He loves deception. He loves to change course and confuse people and create chaos, because chaos is part of the.
It's not, though, that he has any strategic ability to think, right? Because he is a sociopath, and sociopaths are very impulsive. But it's
especially when they're demented. So he can't really have a real serious long-term plan.
I mean, to carry through your point, it's like he loves being able to just have the power to turn it on and off. Right. So it's sort of like
people that in the moment. I mean, as Harry points out, he's very present.
You can do it all over again by dialing Mac down and thinking people are okay. You can dial it back up and torture people. Maybe it's part of the sadism. I think it's sort of an interesting question.
George, listen, the piece you're grabbing onto is his sociopathy. And the piece that John is grabbing onto is the the dementia and the impulsivity and the not thinking very clearly. But I want to add the narcissism. That is, someone like Trump, he wants to do tariffs because it's a nice weapon, right? It's a sledgehammer you could use on the other end. It shows you just how powerful and big you are.
Right. And it's like the pardons and like he loves being able to do things unilaterally. And so he has the power to write out these pardons that piss people off, and he has the power to do these these tariff increases. He loves that, in the executive orders, even though they're illegal, he just loves that with the stroke of his pen, he can upset people.
Right,
so maybe
right.
He likes doing it over and over again.
But George, the piece you're missing is that he's always afraid that all that power will collapse and he'll be humiliated and destroyed by the other. He couldn't believe Biden beat him. He's trying to take down everything Biden did, including the CHIPS Act, which Republicans don't want him to remove, right? So if he does something like, all right, I'm going to put a 25% tariff on Mexico and Canada, and then the stock market sinks, like badly. And then the anxiety starts. Like, wait a minute, what if I'm going to lose this power? So then he goes, we'll stop this for a month, and we'll do this. Until he starts to feel powerful again. That's what I think happens. And he has no long-term thinking, not just because of the incipient dementia, but because of his narcissism. Every moment is an opportunity for power or deflation. That's why you can get him riled up really quickly, as Zelensky did by saying, "You
contradicting
feel,"
him. Yeah.
but also saying to him, "The Russians will come across the ocean and penetrate you." And Trump loses it at that moment, right? Because at that moment, he's no longer all powerful.
No.
So imagine living your life where every instance you're either affirmed as brilliant and great, or you're deflated and you feel like you're nothing, like you're dead. And so Macron comes to the country and goes, "Donald, I love you. You're so great." And everyone knows if you stroke him, he's likely to give you what you want for 5 minutes.
For 5 minutes. That's the thing. I mean, that's another point. That's another point. But to go back to this one, that's a point I would like to get back to. But to go back to this one, I mean, it really is. It's part of the impulse. It relates to the impulsivity. It's like, what is it that I can do at this one moment in time to make myself feel better and more powerful?
Yes.
Right.
And that changes the thinking in his head. You know, there's no order in his mind, right? I mean, it's the same thing with truth and falsity in his mind. It's like whatever comes to his mind that it could be just a random piece of misinformation. It could be accurate. It could be just something he wants to believe. It all is just a giant mush in his head. And different things surface at different times, whether it's about Hannibal Lecter or Arnold Palmer's dick or whatever. It's just all very, random. And then these emotions within him bubble up almost randomly, not completely randomly. They have little triggers that go on there.
Yes.
But it kind of explains why, you can, as I've always said, and this goes back to your point about Macron and stroking him. Oh, that's a terrible image. It's like you can,
especially when he does that dance, that's the double jerk.
Yeah. No, I always said this about people in the first Trump administration. I've been saying this for years. You can manipulate him, but you cannot control him.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's the same thing that you're saying. It's like,
yeah,
and
that's right.
And
that's exactly what happened.
I understand the impulse, not the impulse, but the idea among these Western leaders that you have to stroke him to get what you want. But to some extent, I think it's a fool's errand. I mean, I think I put this online yesterday in response to a post on Blue Sky by a academic, I guess, government professor or something, or foreign policy expert in Ottawa. And I said, it's kind of a fool's errand. I didn't use those words, but it's because you have to realize it's to play Trump that way is okay if you need to buy some time to do something more permanent. But if you think you can get by, you're mistaken, because what you do is you're raising the cost of the next time he wants to extract something from you or punish you or do something.
Exactly.
So it's a no-win situation, even though I understand why Starmer and Macron are huddling with Zelensky to come back here and to do something to mollify Trump. The problem is it's never going to be permanent. And it's just that all that does is increases his feeling of power for the moment. And then the next time he wants to feel like he's feeling like he needs to exert more control in order to make himself feel large again, because he's had some kind of a blow, he's going to want something else.
George, I completely agree with you. I actually made the argument in the show.
If you give a dictator a cookie, if you give a dictator a cookie, he's going to want to take the whole country.
You know what I like to think of? I think of like that. You guys Monty Python fans? Monty Python?
Oh, sure. Of course.
Yeah, it's like, they see the knights who say "me" and they say "me," and this, and then they figure out you have to bring him a shrubbery, and then Roger the shrubber comes by and they give him a shrub. And he says, "We want one larger. We want another one, not too tall, like this one right next to that, matching." But I mean, it's the same thing. It's going to be something else tomorrow, and at some point, you have to say, basta. You have to say stop. You have to stand up to the guy. And I give Zelensky a lot of credit for basically kind of trying to cut through that. I mean, I think he realized I'm not going to get anywhere, or deep down he knows he's not going to get anywhere. So he just basically just pleaded his case before the world, and let them, regardless of the abuse that was raining down upon him in the Oval Office.
Well, actually on the show, I spent some time looking at that. I watched the whole thing. It was fascinating because Trump was feeling very warmly towards Zelensky. He was seeing himself as the great peacemaker.
Right.
He said, I want to be remembered. And then he said, Biden couldn't do it.
Yes.
I'll be able to do it. So, and Macron had kind of had stroked him and gotten him, and the G7 had gotten on the phone earlier in the week and said, we'll take care of security for Zelensky. So you, Donald, don't have to put money into it. So they kind of brought him up to that point. But as I said earlier, and what you're saying now, it's only 5 minutes.
It's ephemeral. And Vance, who really is, an apparatchik, Vance was the one that punctured it. Yes.
He accused Zelensky of humiliating Trump, and then Trump lost it.
Right.
Because Trump has no self-regulation, and he's so severely narcissistic that if there's a hint that he's not powerful, he has to hit.
Right.
And you're right.
Well, and the only thing that would have stopped it at that moment would have been for Zelensky to get on his knees and say, oh, please, master, please.
Exactly.
I thank you for everything that you have done and ever will do for me. So it's funny because I read a piece in Puck, the newsletter, by Julia Ioffe, who's a wonderful analyst. Really great. But she said some things that I kind of didn't disagree with, because it was really an essay about how Democrats on Capitol Hill and many NATO diplomats felt that Zelensky misplayed Trump by being too antagonistic. And I have trouble with that, precisely because it's a lose-lose proposition for the reasons that we've discussed. I mean, you can mollify him for a few minutes, but it's not going to get you anywhere.
Nope.
And,
even a prostitute gives you more time than 5 minutes, right?
I'm trying to think of a rejoinder to that one.
John, are you going to?
I don't know. I don't think anybody would pay Donald Trump a nickel.
I'm just saying, even
your
most
next week's
transactional
guest,
people-
everyone, will be Stormy Daniels. But we'll talk about what can happen in 5 minutes. Now you
well done.
Now you got that's just that
I've
was just
derailed the-
psychological
I've derailed the whole
manipulation
show
on
now.
your part, doctors. I can't think. Oh my goodness.
I don't think John was being therapeutic, actually. He was just being.
Well, I'm just saying,
It was just being mischievous and
I'm just being my mischievous self. Well,
right, yeah.
just,
Well, that's
just
the only
to
way
shift
we
gears
can
for
keep saying it, I think.
Oh, I think
so.
too.
That's true.
That's exactly right.
The other area I wanted to ask you about, we actually showed a clip of you on another show. I can't remember which one it was, where you basically said, look, if he doesn't follow a court order, that's, or a Supreme Court order, that's when it's all over. And you said, I'm hoping it's not true, but in my heart, I believe it's going to happen.
Correct.
And when you said that, it was very somber. There were like 15 other talking heads, and they were all looking very serious while you were talking.
This was one morning on Morning Joe, and I just basically
Morning Joe. That's what it was.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
They didn't know what to say to that, and maybe I was too. I'm just I have less than zero fucks to give about whether people react negatively to what I'm saying, because at the end of the day, they're going to say I was right.
I don't think they were reacting negatively. I think it was more of a somber reaction. I think people took it so seriously.
It was like,
it
was somber. I mean, but it's like there was nothing else to say, I guess. I don't know. I don't know whether. I still don't know whether people can accept what's happening here. I think a lot of people are having trouble with it. I think people in other countries are not having trouble with it because it's not their country and they can see it actually more objectively, like my Canadian friends. And and this French senator. I think a lot of people see it so much more clearly than people here in the United States, because there's just a disbelief that it could be happening here that still persists, even though there is no evidence contradicting the fact that it is happening here.
Right. Right. And as you say, the last line of defense is the courts. And before this show, I was realizing I'm kind of losing track of what's happening with all these court cases. I really ought to educate myself so I can ask George some more intelligent questions. And I went to the New York Times. They have the current state of Trump lawsuits. It's a 20-page document.
It's even there's another tracker in a website run by a friend of mine at NYU, Ryan Goodman. It's called Just Security. And it is, there must be at least 100 lawsuits by now. I mean, couple of weeks ago, there were like 75 or 80. A lot of them, you can kind of put them into various categories.
Yes.
But but it's impossible to keep track of. I mean, it really is. I mean, they are violating the law in so many ways. I mean, there's the birthright citizenship cases. That's one group of cases where they've already basically lost one out in, I think, Washington State, and where they're basically just ignoring the text of the 14th Amendment, which says that all persons born and naturalized in the United States shall be citizens. I mean, there's just nothing, and they hang their argument on a phrase that's attached to that, say, born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. And they argue that people whose parents are not in the United States legally are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, which is just complete bullshit. Okay. If I go to a foreign country and I went to Canada skiing for a week in January. And if I had, if the RCMP had caught me going 150 kilometers an hour on the Trans-Canadian Highway, they would have ticketed me, and I would have had to appear in an Albertan court. So it's not, there's no question that they had jurisdiction over me, and they would have had jurisdiction over me even if I had entered the country illegally, not through a port of entry, and stolen the car. I would have gone to jail for stealing the car. All right, so it's that narrow proviso in the 14th Amendment is essentially about diplomatic immunity.
They're just making it up as they go along to get the result.
Well, they don't make it up. This one, a lot of really crazy right-wing legal scholars have been making this argument up for
at
least 15 years.
But George,
and nobody really
the Supreme Court supported that lower court, saying that the foreign aid had to be restored.
Yeah.
Is this the moment when Trump can say no to the Supreme Court and
I think it could be, but I don't think it will be. I think there will be a point. He's going to lose a lot of these cases. Some of these cases he's going to win, like the case involving Hampton Dellinger, who was the head of the Office of Special Counsel, which is an ethics watchdog that's kind of in the executive branch, but kind of not. He basically lost his case the other day. It was only on, on a stay application, but it made clear that because even the liberal judges on the DC circuit here in Washington weren't going to bite on his claim. He dropped his claim. So that one, they won that one, but they're going to lose a lot of these other cases. They're going to lose, as you point out, the USAID case. They have to lose that one, notwithstanding, although it's crazy that it was only 5-4 on the stay application in the Supreme Court. Alito's dissent basically said, well, there's no authority. This is not, money that Congress has not allowed the court to do this, which is bullshit, because Congress appropriated that money to be spent. And then the government took that money, took that authority, made contracts, had the benefit of the work, so it's got to pay that money out.
Of course. Look, four of the people in the Supreme Court are corrupt.
Yeah, well,
we have two swing justices to hopefully stop the craziest stuff.
And then, so the other cases I think that are interesting to me are the cases that challenge Doge, and in particular, what Elon Musk's role is. And the way to understand those cases are based upon the Appointments Clause of the Constitution, which gives the president the power, generally, to appoint officials, officers of the United States. And officers of the United States are people that are higher than employees because they exercise some significant government authority. And then there are two kinds of officers in the case law. There are inferior officers, which Congress can provide may be appointed by the president without Senate confirmation or by some other method. And as long as the offices they're being appointed to were created, quote unquote, by law. Well, the problem with that is that Doge, the administrator of Doge, is an office that was not created by law. It was created by executive edict, whatever it is that Elon Musk is doing. So that's problem one under the Appointment Clause. Problem two under the Appointment Clause is that if you have somebody who is not an inferior officer, in other words, doesn't report to someone in the chain of command who then reports to someone or reports to the president. In other words, they're kind of two levels down or more. That kind of officer is called a principal officer, like a head of a department, the attorney general, the secretary of defense, the secretary of state. Those people are principal officers under the Constitution and must be Senate confirmed. They're nominated by the president with the advice and the consent of the Senate. And there can be really no question here that Elon Musk is essentially acting as something of like a chief operating officer of the United States.
Right.
He's telling cabinet agencies and therefore cabinet officers, heads of departments, what to do. And he's doing so at the exercising authority on behalf of the president, to which he reports, which is why you saw some news stories about the mystery of who is actually the administrator of Doge, because the government was pressed on that question in at least one district court before at least one district judge here in Washington. And they said, gee, we don't know who's the administrator of Doge. We don't know if there's an administrator of Doge. And then they finally produced some declaration from somebody in the executive office building in the White House who said, oh, some woman named something, I don't even remember her name, is the administrator of Doge. And then what does Trump do? He goes out and his joint session speech before Congress and says, I put Musk in charge of Doge. I mean, they're lying to the court. And it's, they are going to lose those cases. They're going to lose a whole bunch of these cases. And then the question becomes, and here's another one. Last night or this morning, they're floating the idea of issuing, maybe they've issued it already, an executive order saying that the Department of Education is abolished. They can't do that.
They can't do
Congress
that.
created the Department of Education. By law, it is required to perform certain functions. Certain programs are required to be administered by the Department of Education and no other agency. So in order to undo all that, in order to shut down the DOE, you either have to say all those functions are wiped out, there is no DOE, it has to be by statute, or Congress has to transfer these functions to some other agency. It requires a statute. It requires an act of legislation. And Trump is basically, what he is doing is he's usurping by executive order the power of the legislature. And he's not even professing to do it with any authority to do that. At least Hitler in 1934, I think it was, or early 34, after the Reichstag fire, got the Reichstag to pass an act, which was blatantly unconstitutional under the Weimar Constitution, that said that, all legislative powers are hereinafter vested in the Führer. Okay. He's not even bothering that. He's just doing it. And it's really, it's really, really disturbing. And it's basically taking a sledgehammer to the separation of powers, which is the essential, the Bill of Rights were a tack on. Okay, the fundamental protection that we have against tyrannical federal authority is the separation of powers. And he's basically taking a sledgehammer to Congress's authority, and Congress is saying, okay, well, we can't do anything. And you got Chuck Schumer saying Congress should do something. Well, who's Congress, dude? And, and then that's why I say, and that goes back to the Morning Joe depressing thing I said, is that, well, if he's going to do that to Congress, what makes you think he's not going to do it to the courts when the courts say you have to follow the statutes that the Congress passed that you're ignoring? Why should he obey them? Because at bottom, the courts can't enforce their own orders. They don't have police generally. I mean, the Supreme Court has police in its building, but that's just to basically keep people off the plaza. It doesn't have its own police form. The courts don't have.
As Stalin said, the Supreme Court has no army.
It has no army, and the way they enforce orders is by getting the United States Marshal Service. If you are enjoined by a federal judge from doing something, you keep doing it. The judge is going to hold you in contempt and issue an order for U.S. Marshals to come get you. Well, the problem is, with respect to the government, if that person is a government official working for Trump, doing Trump's bidding, well, Trump's just going to tell the head of the U.S. Marshal Service, don't enforce that order. Don't take anything from the courts. And, yes, there's a statute that says the U.S. Marshal Service shall protect the judges and follow the law. But if the head of the Marshal Service is basically saying, give that piece of paper to me, and he puts it in his drawer and nothing happens, the courts are powerless.
I have
hold the U.S. Marshal Service guy in contempt. Say and say you must arrest yourself.
It was like when people stopped showing up to subpoenas at Congress, and they said, "Well, we're going to send the sergeant at arms to get them." It was like,
that worked.
Right.
Yeah, Congress doesn't have it's got the Capitol Police. It has, there's a question of whether it has the inherent power to jail somebody. That was what you're talking about there. But at the end of the day, they can't carry it off.
Yeah. Harry, I have one last question, but do you have a last question? Because I know we're running out of time.
No, I guess just what I was thinking is, if we had a Congress with backbone and Trump refused to do what the Supreme Court says, there would be an impeachment and a trial of the Senate, and that's not.
Imagine that.
That's
the constitutional
remedy. It is the only constitutional remedy, because we all, it's commonly accepted that the president can't be arrested and tried of a crime while he's in office, and who's going to do the arresting anyway, since the people who do the arresting would work for the president. So and an impeachment, even then, it's not self-enforcing. Okay, the Senate would issue a piece of paper saying that President Donald J. Trump is convicted of high crimes and misdemeanors and is removed from office. That's what the judgment would say. And then if he doesn't do that, you're basically at civil war.
Yeah. Well,
but they're not going to do that. They've completely abdicated their Article 1 responsibilities.
And they completely abdicated
there, and in the case and elsewhere.
Yeah. The only chance would be if we did win back Congress, and even with some of these special elections, it's possible. I mean, Jamie Raskin is really trying to raise money for that. But you're right; it's really astounding to watch how the Republicans literally abdicate.
2 long years. We're only how many weeks into this?
I know.
We're only
it's like seeing your house is on fire and saying, "Well, we're going to send a memo to the fire department."
Yeah, no, it's like the Los Angeles fires and saying, "Well, we really can't put the fires out, but 2 years it'll rain." We hope.
Yeah. Well, given how dire all of this is, and given that how much he likes to go after his enemies, and given how with our ad campaign we proved your point that you can provoke him, but you can't control him. On a scale of 1 to 10, how scared are you for your own personal safety, well-being? And on a scale of 1 to 10, how scared should we be?
I'm not, and I'm not scared for my own personal safety. Okay, I'm scared for the country.
Yeah.
I mean, I have never ever felt unsafe walking down the streets, for lots of different reasons.
But I
One is
mean,
the
being audited, being sued, being prosecuted.
I don't. I'm not afraid of that. I'm afraid. What I'm afraid of is that this is a country I may not want to live in much longer.
Yeah.
That's what scares me. That every time I have that thought,
I know,
and I have thought that this is the country that we're leaving our children.
Yeah.
That scares me. I mean, I'm telling my younger daughters, think about going to school abroad. And it concerns me. I don't, the amount of damage that this one man could do may be ultimately irreparable. I hope it isn't.
Yeah.
But that's what scares me.
Yeah.
And
How do you see us getting out of this, if we get out of it? And what are the odds that we do get out of it?
I don't know what the odds are. I mean, who knows? A cheeseburger may do us a favor tomorrow. We don't know. We just don't know how this is going to play out because we are in completely uncharted territory.
Yeah.
There are different outcomes. I mean, we saw there's the German example in the 1940s. There's the Hungarian example over the last few years and the Polish example where Poland came back.
Right.
And I think that the way we come back from this is by a heightened degree of political awareness among the population and activism among those who get it. And I think 48% of the public voted for Kamala Harris. A significant portion of those voted for Kamala Harris for the reasons I voted for Kamala Harris, because I thought that there was the rule of law would only be preserved under a Harris administration and not a Trump administration. I think a lot of people get that, but they, at the end of the day, this is going to be out on the streets. And I'm not advocating violence. I'm just saying that people have to show they want to march and that they want to defend this democracy.
Yeah, I think
show
you're right.
Other people, to encourage other people to come out and embolden people who have been otherwise just sitting around, as we all do, bemoaning what's happening and holding our heads in our hands. We have to, we need a method to express the fact that we're not going to take this line down, that we are not going to just accept the loss of the rule of law and the loss of American constitutionalism and the loss of just decency.
And Jamie Raskin says
that has to be, peaceful, unlike January 6th, but it has to be firm. I mean, people have to get out there. And I think there's a chance that could happen, but we live in an era of almost where politics is, where there's there's a degree to which the public is in politics is impenetrable to the public because they have so many forms of sources of information and forms of entertainment to numb themselves or to distract themselves from things that really should matter, that matter to the survival of the country, that matter to their own survival as a free people, and matter to their children. Look at Russia, for example. There were the massive protests from time to time. They're gone now. People have just decided they're going to just turn inward. Because
I worry about
there's
that.
Nothing else to do. They don't want to be carried off and sent to Siberia. And unfortunately, we don't have that physical threat, but we do have the ability to turn away and turn it off. People do that all the time. Sometimes I wish over the last several years I could turn it off I wish I could just watch SportsCenter all the time and not concern myself with the stuff that's so upsetting. I just don't have that ability.
Right.
But that's the problem. I mean, the problem is there is not just there's a moral degeneracy at high levels of our political system, now controls the government. And then there's a high level of moral apathy that allowed that to metastasize. And that, unless that moral apathy goes away, we're done.
That's a very good point. Jamie Raskin says a protest a day keeps fascism away. But it's kind of what you're saying. People really do need to come out into the streets, and I'm worried that they won't, because they have this moral apathy. Psychologically, it's easier to distract ourselves, and it's hard to sustain the energy for all this protest, especially when the outrage is divided among 100 different issues. When they were just taking away Obamacare, and that was the focus, and people in wheelchairs were chaining themselves to their representatives' offices. That was a focus that we could all kind of focus on. But if there's 100 outrages going on at once, right, it's really hard to mobilize the protests or even the media's attention.
Well, let me just throw something out to make you hopeful. Okay,
good.
It's cold outside today. It's March. It's going to get warmer in April and May. Okay, that's when you always talk about spring, like the Prague Spring or the when was Maidan in Ukraine and May,
the Arab Spring.
The Arab Spring. It's like weather gets good. I mean, I don't know about the weather, what the weather was like in Libya. I'm not but the fact of the matter is, I do think the weather will actually become more conducive.
I never thought of that.
Activities, including outdoor protest activities, I hope. And I think that's going to, this is my rose-colored glasses look at things, and a lot of the things that are brewing that could come to fruition, like for example, the former administrator of the Social Security Administration, who was the former governor of Maryland. He basically said,
Martin O'Malley.
Yes, he basically said that the way things are going, the way the SSA is being administered with the firings and the chaos, he thinks that we only have like 4 to 8 weeks before people's checks stop appearing in the mail.
Oh boy.
And, there's a
That'll
lot
put people out in the street.
Oh, absolutely. As would unemployment, because I don't know, this on again, off again approach to tariffs. It's just making people who make business decisions and resource decisions in businesses and what supplies to buy and so on, they're going to become much more cautious. They may be cautious about expanding output and purchasing supplies because they fear that they could buy all these supplies now before the tariffs go into effect, and then the demand will fall out.
But now that he's fired all the military lawyers, I suspect he may use some of these spring protests as an excuse to declare a state of emergency, to declare something to the effect of martial law in certain areas. That's what I'm worried about.
You should be worried about that. Because as we know, we say these things about this, like, oh, that's not going to happen. People say it's like one thing we learned with this man is there is no bottom. We are talking about things today that are happening now that 6 months ago, a year ago, in 2021, whenever you pick it, oh, come on, that's not going to happen.
Right.
We're so far down, this path. We cannot tell where it ends. And we know, based upon the psychopathology, you guys know, your whole...
There is no bottom.
There is no bottom
for a
narcissist. The only way he gets stopped is for somebody to stand in his way and block him.
Well, listen, I'm just thinking about your hopefulness, and I think you're right about the spring possibly. But George, I just want to say something. I have followed politics since I was 20 years old, the way that most people follow sports. That's 40 years.
Right.
And I remember when you started to appear on MSNBC and CNN. I remember because people would introduce you as a conservative lawyer, or because no one knew who you were. And I watched you develop a voice more and more and more, to the point where you were offering a kind of focus that the country is going to need. So I put you in the category of a voice that may really empower people to keep focused. And I think we should all thank you for what you're doing, but also keep doing it. Keep doing it.
Yeah, no.
The question is how and by what method and what venue and what's
There you
most
are.
effective. And
Well, we're podcasting, so he's in
podcasting.
trouble.
Well, maybe a lot of
And-
people watch.
and you're too-
We'll see how many people watched. And,
All right. Well, thank you,
hopefully
George,
more
for
than the
coming
converted.
Yeah. Well, you're a great friend of the show, and we love having you on, and we'll have to have you on again soon.
Right.
Assuming we're not imprisoned, in which case we may need your voice, but for the prison chorus. Are you a tenor, an alto? Anyway, we'll talk about that.
I don't know. I mean, I can carry a tune. I don't remember what I am. I probably am.
Okay. Well, we'll have a lot of time to work on it.
Not a bass.
Anyway.
All right.
Take care, George. Thanks so much.
Thanks for coming. Really appreciate it. Good to see you. Well, I think he's got a lot of insights and a lot of wisdom, and but also I think he's looking at the situation with very wide open eyes and seeing it both psychologically and politically as dire as it is.
As it is, and he's one of the warriors. He's one of the principal warriors, and we just have to give him as much support as we can. And also, each of us has to do something every day, something to stay focused.
Well, Harry, we've gotten up to the shrink wrap section of the show. What have we learned this week?
We learned that that J.D. Vance is actually even more dangerous than we thought. That he is, as you put it, a Russian guardrail, not a U.S. guardrail. It means we have to pay more attention to him and to consider him as formidable. I think we also learned this week that this is going to keep happening until resistances start to push back. And I do think we saw a bit of that with the Supreme Court. But the real thing is, if he tanks the economy, I don't think the public will stand by him. And the question is he going to tank that before he dismantles our way of life, and our democratic institutions? And I can't tell you which is going to come first.
Or how he's going to react to the protests in the street. We have a certain idea of how powerful those are, and they are. When you think about how many authoritarian regimes, ultimately, it was the protests in the street that often initiated people throwing off the yoke of fascism or authoritarianism. But it's also an opportunity for him to declare a state of emergency and martial law with willing military leaders, absent any legal authority to advise them as to what is or is not a legal military order, absent the woke generals who remember what the code of military conduct is and what the Constitution is, and invoking some sort of fake emergency to claim some extraordinary powers. He may be shooting people on Fifth Ave. He may be having the military shooting people on Fifth Avenue.
Listen, I agree with you. And I think that it will be a dangerous moment. But what I'm thinking is, if he crashes the economy, the midterm elections, if allowed to go forward fairly, and I think they will be, I think there'll be such pushback that we could see a much more emboldened Democratic Party, but even more splinter groups in the GOP deciding that Trump doesn't have the voice of the people anymore. I'm just talking about what I hope would happen. I have no idea whether it will. I have no idea.
But I think the overwhelming feeling this week is one of disgust and moral disgust, as David Brooks was talking about it. To watch an American president lambast an American ally fighting Soviet aggression, it's a horrible feeling. but our country has broken bad.
Yes.
America is not a good country anymore. We're a bad country. We've aligned ourselves with the axis of evil. We have a leader who wants to destroy America, and destroy the Western alliance, and align himself with the most vicious dictator. And what I'm worried about is that this will lead to World War III. Because when you have unconstrained dictators fighting for territory and resources, right? War is the inevitable response. It's actually the default option for humanity. It's what we've been doing for our whole existence.
John?
Yeah.
Listen, these are all possibilities. But as I said last time, you never know. Things happen to change the world, to change to change the trajectory, and really all of you out there. As I say every week, but in a different way, keep your eyes open, spend some time following things, call your representative, talk to your friends, but also enjoy your life as best you can. Hug your children, kiss your partner, call your friends, put on some music. Don't forget the joys of life. They're very precious and quite fleeting for all of us.
So as you know, here at Shrinking Trump, we go the extra mile in our investigative reporting, and we tell you the story that the lame mainstream media refuses to tell you. Well, we found a transcript of the phone call between J.D. Vance and Vladimir Putin before the meeting in the Oval Office, and we wanted to share that with you. So we're going to read that transcript verbatim. Harry will be playing Putin's part, and I'll be playing J.D. Vance, but this is a real transcript. Hi, Vlad. How's the big kahuna?
Vlad?
You know, the top dog.
Vlad?
Never mind. How you doing, big guy?
Niet happy, little pitcher. Niet happy.
What's wrong?
Donald Two-Footsie will soon finish Ukraine. Too bad muchin with Macron.
Oh, okay, I'm going to have to speak in code here, Boris Badenoff, in case the deep state is listening. But let me just put it to you this way. We have a problem with Moose and Squirrel. That's code for Macron and Zelensky, but don't tell anyone. But don't worry, I have a plan. All we have to do is make DT feel small. And making DT feel small, that gives him the DTs.
What?
You just have to make him think Squirrel is dissing him, as the kids say.
What?
Look, Boris, once the boss thinks Squirrel doesn't worship him, he'll throw him out of the White House.
You sure?
Sure, of course I'm sure. Look, I may look like a redneck, but the truth is I'm red all over and red all under. I'm all in for Mother Russia. I'm an apparatchik just like you. In fact, before you called, I was just listening to my favorite song, the Russian national anthem.
Okay, but this niet work, we take out P-tape. P-tape always works.
Well, that's how you got me the vice presidency. Want a drink?
Yes.
Hey, stole.
Okay.
For Mother Russia.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next week. Be well, and I promise JD will be even more evil next week. Take care.
You can count on it.